Hey everybody, this is Meyer, and what we're going to be doing this week is talking about navigating the digital audio workstation that you have, or in particular Studio One for all these examples, with the idea being once you understand how to navigate your digital audio workstation and what all the basic controls are, in the meantime you can get started actually making music as we start talking about more advanced things like sound design, mixing and mastering, and so on and so forth. This is also a good week that if you're already familiar with the digital audio workstation or the digital audio workstation that you're using, feel free to skip a lot of these videos. I don't think there's going to be anything in here that's particularly rocket science, but if you are struggling to understand the basic kind of path that audio and note information takes, or just what a lot of the basic controls do, then this is a good week to brush up on that or learn for the first time. So if you guys remember from last time, the digital audio workstation serves three main purposes, or I like to think of it as serving three main purposes. Number one, it allows you to record and arrange audio information. Number two, it allows you to sequence MIDI information. And number three, it allows you to arrange your entire track consisting of audio and MIDI information and do all the mixing and mastering from there. So that's kind of part of the arrangement process. And it's where you're going to be spending most of your time. So depending on who you are, you may call it a host or a sequencer if you're doing more MIDI arrangement type of stuff, or you may call it an audio editor or just a digital audio workstation, or even a mixing console replacement kind of thing if you're doing more audio, but in reality, most people end up doing a little bit of both. And of course, if you're taking this course in person, we of course have site licensing for Studio One, but if you're already familiar with another digital audio workstation and you'd like to use a different one, you're more than welcome to do that. Everything that we teach here should be easily transferable to any digital audio workstation. Also, if you're getting started, we're going to be doing all our demos here in Studio One, especially this week. So follow along, and if you're new to it, we do recommend you start with Studio One as well. So now what I want to do is talk about when you're creating a song, what settings you should choose, because when you actually click create a song, or when you open the application for the first time, you're presented with a lot of different options. So when you open up Studio One, you actually have three different choices. You have a new song, you have a new project, and you also have shows. This is something new in Studio One 5, where you can have like a live set. So really, most of the time what people want to do is just create a new song. A project is like a collection of songs. So if you think of like a record or an album that you're going to be mastering all the songs together, that's what a project is for, is kind of a collection of songs. So most of the time people are wanting to just create a song and get started, and then later on they can create a project that encapsulates a bunch of different songs if you're trying to sort of combine those together and do any processing on it as a group. So when you click create a new song, you're presented with this page, and I remember when I was getting started with Studio One, way back in version like 1 or 2, being really overwhelmed with what this page meant. So let's go through what all these settings kind of mean very basically, and then we'll talk a little bit about what I recommend choosing, because a lot of these things can be changed later. So on the left here, you have this page where you can choose any sort of template or these different styles that are there. And a lot of this will do a lot of routing for you in terms of how many tracks are created, what types of processing are on those tracks. But for now, I usually recommend just starting with an empty song. I actually kind of discourage people from using these templates all the time, because a lot of times you're going to have stuff that you don't need, and you want to make sure you understand how to do it all yourself at least once, and then you can create your own template. But that's just my recommendation. Then, of course, you have the name of your song. You may not know, but it's good to give it a name, and sometimes even a date, so you know when you're working on it and things like that. And then, of course, the path that this song is going to be stored at. By default, this is in your Documents folder. There's like a folder called Studio One in your Documents folder, and that's where all the songs are stored, under this Songs folder. And then we get into kind of the more technical details, which we'll be talking about more in later weeks. The first one is the sample rate. For now, I really recommend choosing 44.1 kilohertz unless you have a particular reason why you're wanting to choose something else. In particular, if you're trying to do film scoring or scoring for film, 48 kilohertz is a better choice. But for now, we're going to choose 44.1 if you're just doing music. Also, your bit depth or resolution. Right now, I really recommend choosing 24 bits. And of course, your time base, this really doesn't matter because this is very easy to change later, but I just set it in bars. This is, I think, the default setting as well. And then your song length, once again, this is just how long you think your song is going to be. I don't even know why they give you this option, because most of the time when I'm writing a song, I have no idea how long it's going to be. Maybe I have a ballpark estimate, and maybe that's kind of what they expect, is it'll set markers for you depending on how long you think it's going to be. So I usually just leave this alone, and you can change that very easily later. Then you have the tempo or the speed of the song, and this is in beats per minute. So this isn't related to the length. This is the actual rate at which the song is progressing. Once again, we'll talk about this later in another video, but for now, you can set something and then you can always change it later very easily. So I would just choose that. And then, of course, you have your option for the time signature, which once again, we're not going to get too much into this right now, but this kind of is the time base that your song is progressing at. And I would say stick with 4/4. 95% of the time, you're going to be using 4/4 time, unless you know exactly what you're doing and why you want to change it. And once again, this is another thing that can be easily changed later, so don't stress out about that. Then when you click OK, you're presented with this page, which is here in Studio One, where you kind of have a lot of different options. So we'll go through what all these different settings or menus are and what everything looks like, because this can be overwhelming at first. So the very basic way to think about this is on the horizontal axis, you have time. And once again, we chose our time base to be bars. So it makes sense that we have our first bar, second bar, third bar, and fourth bar. So what ends up happening is as you play the song, the playhead moves from left to right. And as it collides with audio files or MIDI files, those play sound through the mixer that comes out your speakers. So you can think of time going from left to right. And then on the vertical axis, you have your different tracks, which I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But these can be audio tracks that contain audio information, or MIDI tracks which contain note information, which are then converted into audio based on different instruments or synthesizers that are placed there. You can also right-click here in this gray area, which gives you the option to add tracks and also add other things that we're not going to talk about right now. But basically the main thing is just whether or not you're adding an audio track or an instrument track are kind of the two main things. And then also some organizational stuff like folders, which can organize your tracks into a big folder that you can then collapse if you don't want to see all that stuff at the time, which can be really helpful if you're working on a larger project. Down at the bottom, we have what we call our transport controls. And if you remember like a DVD player, I don't know, makes me feel old even referencing that, but these are the basic controls you'd see on a remote like that: rewinding, fast forwarding, jumping to the start, playing and pausing, and then enabling record. And we'll talk about what all those controls do exactly in particular in another video, but for now, on the bottom, that's usually where the transport controls are. Then on the right, you have your three editor windows, which include your edit tab, which can be either editing individual audio samples if you're working with an audio file, individual notes if you're working with a MIDI file, and then you have your mixer, and then you have your browser on the right. So the browser allows you to kind of audition different sounds, instruments, effects, all sorts of things like that, and generally import those files from locations on your computer into your project. So when you're presented with a song, the easiest thing to do is to find a file from the browser and drag it into an empty area. And it's what it'll do once you open the browser and you navigate to one of these places. It'll actually create a new track for whatever type of file it is. So Studio One has this interesting proprietary music loop format, which actually contains both the instrument that generates the music loop as well as the note information there included within the music loop, which is a little bit more flexible than just an audio file. Thanks for watching. In the next videos, what we're going to be doing is talking about the transport controls in more detail. So what's presented there at the bottom of your screen. And hopefully you found this video helpful. And don't forget to check out that Discord again for more tips and tricks on Studio One and any other digital audio workstation. See ya.